Hello, and welcome to another live stream. I didn't get to do one last week, being still pretty deep into the Incus 01 release and dealing with a number of issues and just getting things kind of up and running and published everywhere and all that stuff. But I figured I'd do one this week to just kind of catch up and make some progress. So, where kind of do we stand with Incus right now? So, as mentioned, obviously 0.1 has been out for actually 2 weeks today. And looking at releasing 0.2 next week. So that will effectively let Incus go and catch up to LXD 519. Those changes are already now in Incus. We can actually see here there was a pull request merged just a few hours ago that imported effectively all the remaining changes of LXD 519. And we also started to include some new stuff, so that's quite exciting. Another change that came in yesterday, I guess apparently there's some tests that need to be restarted anyways, is around adding a new requirement that can be added to images. And in this case, it's to require that an image is only used for unprivileged containers, and that's to enable the NixOS images. So that's been done, and that's actually, we're kind of starting to diverge from LXD, but just in small aspects here and there. And there's a good chance that LXD will then import those changes, and the two projects effectively just gonna go back and forth on new features. Anyways, the goal of this live stream is to kind of look at testing, which actually is funny because I'm just seeing that test failure, so that's bugging me a bit. I'm gonna go and see what's going on. Okay, so it's just 2 tests that failed. That happens. So I can just go rerun failed, and that should take care of that. There we go. There we go. So that's restarting. And yeah, effectively we've got a test suite in place right now, which covers quite a lot of tests, and that's what we see here in GitHub Actions. Just like the one I restarted, we see we're testing against Go 120 as well as Go Stable, which would be 121, and Go Tip, which is the current development release. And we're testing across a wide variety of storage backends, and for both clustered and standalone. And then each of those runs like in the hundreds to thousands of containers and instances and stuff to really test everything. So that's already pretty good coverage, but there are a bunch of things that just can't be tested in such an environment. Like if anything needs hardware, whether it's testing GPUs, USB devices, specialized storage, specialized networking, all that kind of stuff, that can't really be tested in that environment. The same goes if you need to test against something like Oven or even like a fully functional Ceph cluster. It's not really possible to test it there. Things that depend on external resources also a bit tricky. So things like running Docker containers inside of Incus, that would be another thing like that. And also anything that needs specialized kernel configuration. So things like testing different C group configuration, for example, that can't really be done through those tests. So that's all things for which we have separate tests that are supposed to run on a schedule every day. Those were in place for LXD back when LXD was under Linux containers. After it moved to Canonical, I believe most of those tests are now run manually by developers over there because they don't have an equivalent testing infrastructure anymore. But for Incus, well, since I was providing the testing infrastructure for LXD, I still have all of those machines, still have all of that stuff. So now we need to get those tests kind of dusted up, converted from LXD to Incus, and make sure they still work, and then put them back into our CI system, which is Jenkins. So that's kind of the idea. I picked a couple of ones that I think should be pretty reasonable to work on today, and we'll see just how far we can get with that. I see a couple of questions here in the chat, so I'm going to respond to those real quick. There's a question around the project version numbers and trying to line them up. So no, they're going to be different. And they currently are. We're at Incus 0.1, which is roughly equivalent to LXD 518. So it's very different already. Things will line up at some point to an extent, mostly by accident. So with Linux containers, we also have the projects LXC and XCFS that are in pretty active development. And those have version numbers that line up with LTS releases. So right now we've got LXC 5.0 alongside LXCFS 5.0. And LXD, for the same reason, was also numbered at 5.0 for its latest LTS. That means that come March or April next year, when we do the next LTS across all of the Linux containers projects, we'll go to 6.0. And that means that at that point, we expect that Incus will also bump to 6.0. So that's going to be a bit weird. Incus will effectively go from probably 0.8 or 9-ish at that point, straight to 6.0. It's something we've already done in the past with LXD. LXD never had a 1.0 release. It went straight from a 0 point something straight to 2.0 for the exact same reason that it was lining up with LXC and XCFS. It's going to be interesting this time around because it means that effectively both LXD and Incus are going to line up with versions around the same time for 6.0. But they may be quite different. Anyways, it's all going to be a bit of a mess at the beginning, I expect. In general, it should kind of still help with users because we expect that Incus 6.0 LTS will support importing from LXD 6.0 LTS. The reason being that we kind of need that for stable Linux distributions to be able to upgrade their users and then migrate them away from LXD to Incus. So we're going to have to try and make that work. So that's kind of the idea. So currently, no relation between the version numbers of the two projects. With the next LTS, probably they will line up at least for a little bit. But the two projects will be different, like the feature set and everything is different. So people shouldn't necessarily assume that what works on LXD will work exactly the same on Incus. Alrighty. So kind of back to tests. So we've got Jenkins, which is actually currently, I was doing some maintenance. I should actually undo that. So I'll just cancel that. And cancel maintenance, we're good. So that's our Jenkins instance. It's the main, it was used for both pull request testing as well as scheduled testing and builds in the past. Because Jenkins is a bit of a security nightmare, I don't want that to keep being the case moving forward. So moving forward, I want Jenkins to effectively only run scheduled tests so we can make it completely read-only from the outside. That should help quite a bit because, yeah, it's a bit risky there. So for all of the stuff that we do based on pull requests or based on Git repos, we're using GitHub Actions with a mix of GitHub Actions runners that are provided by GitHub and with self-hosted runners for the rest. For the image builds and everything, we find Jenkins work well enough because it effectively is just a web cron job to an extent. It just runs things on a schedule, automatically retries things. It's got a REST API to go and pull data from, and it gives us a decent dashboard to see what's going on. So we intend to keep using Jenkins for all of the daily tests and for image building, but not for anything else. So effectively those LXC builds here, so LXC build Android, build tarballs, Ubuntu source, and the LXC GitHub commit and pull test, those need to be converted to GitHub Actions and they'll go away from Jenkins, whereas the rest will stay. So currently you can see we've got all of the image builds for the different distros that we build images for, and then those trigger a dependent build called test image, which validates that the images actually work before we go and publish them. On top of that, as far as daily tests, we've got a daily benchmark of chaos equal. So that's the database used by Incus. And we're now going to be introducing back a number of daily tests into it. Again, I really don't like the security implication of Jenkins. So the good things that once the LXC tests are out of it, we can effectively make it read-only so that from the outside world, nobody can do anything. We can only read data out of Jenkins, and changes to it are only done through Git, which is already how it's been mostly done. we're using Jenkins job builder, which effectively takes YAML definitions of all of the jobs. So that's what we have here in this repo. And that then generates the configuration of the Jenkins server. So nobody ever goes through the web UI to modify any job or any of that kind of stuff. The only thing I do through the web UI is just turn maintenance mode on and off as I'm doing the Jenkins updates. Anyway, so going back to the tests that we have available, we still have all of the old scripts for all of the LexD tests. So that's what we can see here, all of the test LexD stuff. And most of those should be converted back to Incus. Some of them will go away simply because they're not relevant. There's no such thing as like a full cloud offering of Incus. So the test LexD cloud thing will go away. There are also, which ones should go away in there? Deception mass. Well, the mass test will go away because that doesn't exist anymore, and that feature has been removed. PyLexD will go away as well. RBAC will go away. So there are a few tests that we can just plain remove, but then the rest should get converted to Incus and then run again. As I mentioned, I think the two that I would like to look at today, which hopefully we can do within an hour, is the cgroup test, because that's a pretty important one. It tests all of the limits that can be applied to instances, and it tests that against cgroup 1, cgroup 2, and I think a hybrid setup or something like that. And the other one would be the Docker test, because a bunch of people have been kind of commenting that they're trying to run Docker instead of Incus, and I've been running into some issues here and there. So having those tests back up would be nice. I think I know what the issue might be. There's been a problem with AppArmor inside of Incus instances. I fixed it upstream by sending a fix a bit over a week ago, but it's going to take a little while for Linux distros to get that fixed. So I suspect that's probably what people have been running into, and we'll probably need to run in, like to patch it up as well here. So let's just get into a terminal. Okay. And I'm gonna go into my copy of the CI repo. So that's that. Just make things a bit larger. And the first thing we can do is just do a bit of cleanup. So let's start by removing all the tests that will never be ported. That's probably a good idea. So that goes away, that goes away, that goes away. And that goes away. There's a question around whether privileged containers are required for running Podman. I don't know for Podman, I've never used it, but for Docker, you don't need to. So I do run a number of Docker containers inside of LexD containers instead of Incus containers on my own infrastructure. And I'm using unprivileged containers for all of those. It's not all Docker images will be happy with that. So there may be some workloads that just won't work and that would actually require privileged containers. But in general, it's not a requirement. And there are some config keys you can set if you run into issues to enable some specific aspects of it, which I believe might be in the documentation. If not, I did make a video back in the LXD days that covers those. All right, so remove those tests because they're not relevant. So let's just commit that already. I got the usual problem of okay, so those go away. And now let's just rename the two that we want to work on today. So that's test LXD cgroup, that's gonna become test Incus cgroup, and Docker to test Incus. Okay, so that's a start. I should actually have the git move for that, but anyway, figured it out. Let's look at the Docker one since people are asking about it. So for Docker, well, the first thing we're gonna do is just replace all mentions of LXC with Incus. So that's usually a good start. There we go. The way this test runs is that it actually runs on one of our test runners. So it doesn't deploy a new machine or anything. It just runs on our test runner, creates a new Incus container, goes in there, installs AppArmor, Docker, wget, and then runs runs the test. That's fine. But as mentioned, we're gonna run into an issue with AppArmor. So to fix that, I do have a workaround that was put in another test, one other script in there, which I think is probably in build distro. Is that how we put it? No, it is not. I'm looking for a specific chunk of code. I think it's when build image, maybe. Build image distro builder. Install the dependencies. No. Okay, well, that's, I think it's RC AppArmor. Oh, okay, it's in the LXC test we had that issue. There we go. Okay, so that's, I should actually put a comment here, workaround for AppArmor bug. And let me just find the link to that. I should have the AppArmor merge request somewhere. Yeah, it's this thing. Okay, so that's where we remember what it is and remember to remove that workaround once the fix is widely available in distros, which that's gonna take a little while. But I'm just gonna mention that in both the scripts. Okay, so that's done for those two. There's a question around the sign off. So the sign off byline, it's actually covered in our contributing guidelines. So if you do Incus, it's actually pretty standard. It comes from the initially the kernel community did that, and then it's become standard in a bunch of other projects, but it's this section here. So that refers to the developer certificate of origin, which is effectively just a statement from whoever made the change that they have the right to contribute to that change. So that means they either own the copyright themselves and they're fine to contribute it under the license of the project, or they work for a company that allows them open source contributions. So it's not, there's no copyright assignment or anything going on. It's just a statement that, yeah, you're actually allowed to contribute this code. This was introduced, I think, in the Linux project around some of the very early on lawsuits around the Linux project, effectively as a way to just have clearer copyright information on the changes. So that's something we require. Git does it kind of automatically, either by you having it on in your config or by passing the -s flag whenever you commit. And that does look like this, like the sign off by first name, last name, email address. So that's something we require across all of our projects, to just have that extra level of safety. Like, should someone start some kind of legal action or anything, or we need to figure out who contributed what, who owns the copyright on what line of code, effectively, we've got a clearer history that way, more than just the author field that Git provides. Okay, just getting my windows back up. So this thing, and we were here. Okay, so I just cleaned up those, and I wanted to actually copy paste those two lines like that. And we go into the Docker one. Okay, because we see here that it does install AppArmor and then it starts it. So we need the exact same workaround there. So that AppArmor actually does start properly, and then Docker should be happy. Let's just see if there's anything else in there that needs changing. So the syntax for delete is the same between next and Incus, so we're fine. Launch, we're using Ubuntu Bionic, which is old, so let's not do that. Let's go straight to Jammy. With nesting enabled, that's fine. We'll see if that gives us any trouble, the fact we're running Jammy now, but it probably won't. Then it installs AppArmor, Docker itself from the distro and wget. And then it goes and effectively replaces the distro binaries with the ones from the latest upstream build of Docker, because the goal is to see both that Docker works within Incus, but also that Docker upstream doesn't regress us in some way. So that's why we're putting the latest one. So that's fine. Docker starts, and then we pull and run busybox and a hello world. Okay, so that should be fine. So let's just go ahead and include all the changes from the Docker script. Test Incus Docker, update for Incus. Let's go with that. It included more than I meant. Because we really only want the Docker change in this one. Thank you very much. Okay, did I get the right thing this time? Yeah, it shows one file renamed and then a few changes to it. Good. So that's fine. Let's go and just do a manual test first. Oops, there was so much changes. Let's just, oopsie, let's go and pull those. I think it's because I merged pull request this morning. Okay, cool. So let's push what we have. And now I'm just gonna go directly on one of the test runners. And first I need to actually use LXC because it's on an old LXD cluster that hasn't been migrated yet, because we don't have logic to migrate LXD clusters to Incus just yet. But it should be migrated next week. All right. So if I go, oops, bash project LXC. Okay, cool. So that's one of our test runners. Let's go and refresh the code. So it's got the latest copy of it. It's fine. And I don't recall if there's any argument needed to that particular script. Let's see. Docker, does it take any argument? Don't think it does. I think it just creates a container and runs it. So that's fine. Let's just go bin test incus docker and see what happens. So it's pulling that image. It's fine with nesting enabled. Okay, starting it, making sure network is functional, which takes a little while. Okay, network is good, installs packages. So far, so good. Then it's gonna go and patch up that AppArmor script. So that's gonna be the extra bit of code that was added. And then start AppArmor, which hopefully will work. And then it's gonna try and get Docker going. Okay. If that works, then the next step is just to add back the Jenkins job definition to the repo, and that one test will be fine and will then run every day on a schedule. Okay, so it's downloading all of the binaries now from the Docker project directly. I wonder if they've got ARM64 binaries. If they do, that could be interesting to add, just so we can test on both architectures, since we have those. Okay, so pull worked fine. Hello world, let's see. Hello world ran just fine. So we've got hello world from Docker, and then the test cleaned itself up just fine. So that test is good. Now the question is, can we get that working on ARM too? Because that would be neat. So right now here we can see we've got a hard-coded x86-64, and that's not gonna do it. So if we need the kernel architecture, we should use that uname-m. And we actually need to escape it here. There we go. Because it runs, it's a script in a script effectively. And the rest should be fine. So let's try that. Test incus docker. Add ARM64 support. Well, technically we just added support for every single architecture that exists, but anyway, that's the main goal. So Docker and push. Okay. So here I was on an Intel machine, so you can see it's build 11, and it's should be AMD EPICs. Yeah, that's one of my servers here. Now if I switch to build 8. This is gonna show AR64, so it's on ARM. And we can see the CPU info output. Doesn't tell you the architecture really, but it's clearly not Intel anymore. So let's try it here now. So just pull the test and test Incus Docker and see what happens. Like, it's making a few assumptions. Effectively, it's making the assumption that those binaries exist for ARM, which I have no idea if they do. And it's also making the assumption that they call the ARM64 architecture after the Linux kernel name, which is ARch64, and not like ARM64 or something else. So we'll see soon enough, but with a bit of luck, this will work. Like in general, we like testing on both Intel and ARM whenever possible, just to, like, we don't want any logic in Incus or in any of our projects to end up being architecture specific. And because we all develop on Intel AMD, so x86 architectures, it's good to have the CI test on ARM as well. And at least back in the LXD days, ARM was a pretty sizable user base, mostly because of Chromebooks that are ARM64. Look at the Chromebook I've got behind me on the shelf back there, is ARM64. Alright, so that's almost installed. It's gonna download the binaries, and that's the step that might just end up failing, so as we'll see. I could have tried it manually outside of this, but yeah. Okay, that went way too fast, so those downloads just completely failed. Let's see. Okay. What's going on here? Get and dir. Yeah, okay. Is it because it created something else? No. Okay, let's go see. I'm just checking in a web browser to see what they have. Maybe they don't. It's an Amazon buckety thing, like an S3 bucket, so we can't actually just list things. Well, that's unfortunate. Because yeah, that doesn't exist. This should exist. Oh, well, that's convenient. It doesn't actually tell you what exists and what doesn't, so that's unfortunate. Yeah, okay. So the test can't run on ARM because they don't publish ARM64 binaries by the looks of it, at least not on that server. So that's annoying. There was a question around any special issues with Macs. Not really. I mean, we don't run Incus daemon on Macs because Incus expects to run on Linux right now. But the client tool itself is built and tested on Macs and is available through Homebrew. And that works just fine. There's nothing weird there. It works the exact same way on Intel and on ARM. Okay, so anyway, ARM64 not gonna work for this particular test. That's fine. Just need to go and look at the commit where I removed the test to just restore that. That was quite a while back. It was probably in July-ish. Let me check. There should be a commit in July that just kind of removed everything. 18th, 11th. I'll drop all LXD jobs. That sounds like it. So we're gonna want to go to the commit prior to that and then check out what was the test. So we do the commit and then ask for the commit just prior. Just prior, there we go. And then jobs, and the job would have been maybe test lexd docker.yaml. No, lexd test docker.yaml maybe. Yay, bingo. Okay, so that's the old job restored, and now we need to rename that to incus test docker.yaml. There we go, jobs incus test docker, and a few more renames in there. So incus test current upstream build with latest stable incus, or actually with latest, we'll do daily. No, actually it's stable, that's running on the servers, never mind, so that the description is correct. Okay. Oh, and we were actually testing privileged and unprivileged, so it does take arguments. I did not notice that. Okay. Anyway, that's fine. So we're just gonna do incus instead of lexd here. And the rest should be fine. There's nothing particularly weird. Okay. So I'm gonna add the changes from the Jenkins jobs, and yeah, that should be fine. So Jenkins reintroduce Incus test Docker. Included one file, good. Go ahead and push that. So it's going to take a few minutes for Jenkins to actually notice. I do have another script I can run, which is for the builders themselves. I've got a script that just updates the Git repo on all of them. So I don't need to wait an hour or whatever time it takes for them to go and pull the test as well. So that's fine. And then in a few minutes, we should just see the new test show up in the Jenkins UI and can do a manual run from there. Cool, so that one was easy. The other one's going to be a bit worse. So it's the cgroup test. Let's work on the script first. So test selects the cgroup. That obviously got renamed to Incus cgroup. And then let's go ahead and do our usual dance of rename all the things. There we go. So that's good. Now in there, we've got, actually what I should do first is allocate a VM. So for those kind of tests that depend on specific kernel configurations, we are using Maz to manage both our physical and virtual test systems. So that's what I'm gonna get into. That was obviously something we built back when I was at Canonical and still using now, because for that kind of stuff, Maz actually works really well. It's got other issues, but for that it's fine. So VM01, I need to also look at the Jenkins job we used to have for this one. So check out, that's going to be Jenkins job test cgroup. Okay. And then we move it from, actually just a normal move from Jenkins job XD test cgroup to Jenkins jobs. Yeah, Incus test cgroup. Okay, so let's just go look at what was allocated in there. Okay, so we're deploying. I wanted to check what distro the test was running on. So it's running on Jammy, so Ubuntu 22.04 on the original kernel, and then it calls one of our scripts to apply additional kernel config. So that's fine. If I go back here, I can take that VM and we'll do a deploy 22.04, and we wanted the GA kernel and deploy that. So then I'm gonna be able to just run scripts on there. Well, that went well. Failed deployment immediately. Okay. Why? Failed. Oh, whoops. Okay. Yeah, I've not used Maz in a little while, but it looks of it because it doesn't know that my home cluster has changed quite a bit. That's interesting. There's a question around what's Maz good for. I mean, Maz is pretty convenient in our case at providing an API we can talk to allocate both physical and virtual machines and deploy a base OS on them. So that's what we use it for our CI, and that works well enough. Like for VMs, we could just have a script that deploys directly against Incus. That would be easiest. But that wouldn't really necessarily work for physical machines. And as soon as you need to treat physical machines differently, it ends up being a massive pain. So the issue here is that server doesn't exist anymore. This one does. So I'm just going to change the name and hope the rest is still good. Okay. And let's see. So if I do check power, shows power off. Okay, that's fine. Let's try releasing it again. Yay, okay. So that was the only issue, just it was talking to a server that didn't exist anymore. So now to fix that, I should be able to have it deploy Ubuntu 22.04 there. There we go, deploying. And the log should update soon enough with the VM starting up. Those VMs have not been used in months, so I'm kind of hoping that everything still behaves. We'll see. Now, while that's going on, let's just go take a quick look at Jenkins. With a bit of luck, the new test appeared by now. Yeah, Incus test Docker showed up here, so that's good. And let's just kick it off and see what's going on. And we saw the unprivileged test run earlier, so let's take a look at the privileged one just to make sure that this works as expected. And you can see the exact same output as we're getting in the terminal, but now it's running through Jenkins. I guess that's the other thing we like with Jenkins, just being able to send each other's link whenever something breaks, or just like, hey, look, this test run, and you've got the entire shell output, which helps a fair bit to reproduce things locally. So anyway, downloading the binaries. I'm hoping that privileged works the same as unprivileged, and that we're good with that. Just waiting, and okay, so seems to be working so far. Yep, all good. So now we should see, okay, unprivileged is still running somehow. It's weird. Expecting it to go faster than this. Okay, just finished now. Never mind. So we're all green, and that's one test done. Now let's look at that VM. How far are we with deploying this? Well, that went well. Failed to deploy. BMC transition from off to on. Lovely. Let's try that again. As I said, those VMs have not run in a while, so it's not too weird that things are all kind of broken, but still a bit disappointing. So Maz Lab. I'm just gonna try and manually start the VM it was trying to start, just make sure there's nothing completely busted with it. Yeah, that's not good. Failed adding block device for disk. Root failed AIO. Okay, yeah. So what happened is that those VMs used to be on Ceph, now they're running on local ZFS instead, and the profile that they're running on was never updated by the looks of it. Again, not running in months, so it's not too surprising, but they're using config options that are incompatible. So we'll just do an edit on the default profile. Here we go, and remove the IO cache unsafe. And that should take care of that. Okay, let's try it again. Deploy 2204 GA. Start deploy. And this time we should see it. So it's still stopped. Come on. Still stopped. What's going on? Is it even trying? Okay, just powering on. But this one still shows it as stopped. Okay, that's not working very well. What's going on? Exact same error, but I removed the config. It's always that thing when you end up debugging things that you're not expecting every time. Okay, it's because the root device is not defined through the profile, it's directly set on the VM for some reason. Okay, no idea why it's done that way, but let's not just do it the easy way and remove the config, and that will take care of that. So now, can I please get my down VM up and running, please? Okay, well, that's lovely. Just hit the wrong thing and I've got to authenticate again. Okay, so ready, deploy, GA, go. And we're gonna have to fix the rest for good measure. So how many did I have? 16. Okay, so 02 to 16 do. Ah, I don't want to show on device and set. Come on. Okay. Alright, that will fix that for good. And it shows started releasing. What's the actual state now? Yeah, there we go. Deploying power on loading ephemeral. Okay, finally making progress. So it's actually booting into the provisioning environment now. So we could actually go look at the console of that. There we go. So it's effectively booting into a minimal Ubuntu install. Then it runs a script that Maz manages to download the OS and just write it down onto disk. So that usually takes 2 or 3 minutes to have it happen, at which point we'll be able to actually run the tests directly on that machine. Once that works, then Jenkins will do that for us automatically. So while that's going on, let's go look at the actual test we're working with. So it's test Incus C group. And there's a bunch of remaining legacy stuff in there that needs to be cleaned up. So snapd seeding, really don't care anymore. Proxy, don't care anymore. Installing LexD, well, obviously we're not going to be installing LexD, we're going to be installing Incus in here. So we can remove all that stuff pretty much and replace that with new instructions. Those VMs are a bit more fat than most test systems, but let's just play it safe anyways. So we're gonna install curl. And then with curl, we can go, actually someone updated the instructions on the stable repo recently. Well, I think both on stable and daily actually, with pretty good instructions. So we can pretty much copy paste that. So that's the curl command we want to download the keyring. And then that's the command we want to, this one is stable, we want daily, to put the daily repo in place. And once that's in place, then we just need to update the package list. And then installing Incus itself, no need for the recommands, so no install recommands. Okay, then configure Incus, sure, so we'll just do the exact same thing. So that's Incus admin init. So that's gonna just initialize it, and then we can start playing with containers. This is using 2004, let's bump that to 2204 for good measure. And then the rest should be mostly the same. So execute nproc, check the limits. Okay, then apply limits and validate. That should be all fine. That should be all fine. Just looking for anything that might have changed. But I don't think so. I think that should all be fine. So it does quite a few tests. I mean, it does some of the basic things around what the CPU limits are, CPU shares, number of bits, memory available, that kind of stuff. It does that pretty easily. I believe this one is not gonna work actually. I mean, the initial test will probably work fine, but it's a test for network priority, and that doesn't exist anymore. That has changed in a way that can't be tested so easily anymore. So this particular test needs to go away. Okay. The rest of the config still make complete sense because it's going to be validating throughput limits and all that kind of stuff, which works fine. But that particular test needs to go away. So net prio is effectively not really a thing anymore with cgroup 2, and that's been replaced by using firewall rules effectively to achieve similar results. Okay, so that needs to go away. So I said, like, it does the memory, CPU, PIDs, and memory checks. Then it validates actually applying and setting limits for things like specific CPU pinning and the like, making sure that that all works. Then testing CPU priority, scheduler allowances, the actual memory limits, testing the swap as well, and making sure the swap behavior is what we normally expect. Memory enforcement in both soft and hard mode, and checking the PIDs limits work properly. For network, it actually uses iPerf to do an actual throughput test, outputting as JSON and then looking at the results there. And it also tests or attempts to test block IO limits. Those are a bit more hit and miss because not all kernels, not all backends and stuff support it. So we'll see if they actually work today. But yeah, that's the main thing there. All right, so I think that test looks fine. Let's just go ahead and add that to the repo. What's going on here? Untracked, Incus test. Okay, so we just want to make sure that this test goes away. So let's just do that. Okay, so to be committed, just the addition of the. I'm confused now. What the hell? It's as if I committed the wrong file in an OIR command. That would be annoying. Anyways. Okay, so test Incus cgroup port to Incus. So there's a question around all of the tests that you can see in there, like if else, if else, if else everywhere. And yes, it's to support both cgroup 1 and cgroup 2. Incus supports both, but obviously the test needs to check different things as far as the kernel paths and everything, depending on which of the two it is. So pretty much every single test has an equivalent for both cgroup 1 and cgroup 2. So that's what you're seeing in there. Just checking if there was any other question there. Nope, I think we're good. All right, let's just go see if our VM got deployed by now. That would be nice. Yeah, deployed, VM01, cool. So what we're gonna be doing is actually transferring to a script. So there's a script called maskernel. And the script we actually worked on. So this one is going to be on vm01.lab.mas, transfer that. And then transfer the actual test script, so test Incus cgroup. Okay, I also want to just remind myself of how they were actually being called back in the days. So Incus test cgroup. Because I think we might pass an argument to the script, maybe? No, we don't, okay. So it just looks at the config, whether it's on cgroup 1, cgroup 2, swap account, and then does the right test. So I think what we'll be doing here is, so it uses the stock kernel, which is fine, it's what we have. So we'll just run, say, the cgroup 2 config, and then run the test and see what happens. That would feel better, I think, if we were running on our kernels, because those will actually understand when they break. So anyway, let's go to that. So vm01.mas. So we're gonna do a maskernel, and let's just try default. So default, and I think it's called, is it just called Zabli, the option to install the Zabli kernel? Yeah. Okay, so maskernel, and we'll do a default Zabli, default, like that. What does that do? Failed to create the file, permission denied. Oh, I'm not running as root. That would explain it. And there. So that's a wrapper script we effectively have for anything we run on MAS, which lets us change the kernel configuration. So in this case, I'm saying Zabli and default. Zabli means it's pulling my kernel from my kernel repo, which it just did now. And then default means we don't want to change any other kernel configuration. So now to actually go and apply that to the CI repo. That's gonna turn into Incus test C group. So we've got here the 3 kernel values, default, C group 2, and swap account. Because we always want the Zabli kernel, we're just gonna be adding it here to the list. And that should do what we want. That effectively gives us more control on the exact kernel being used by using the one I produce, and so the one I can easily debug if something goes wrong. And unlike the Ubuntu kernel, where debugging is a bit of a pain. So the kernel is being installed, and once the mass kernel script completes, it restarts the VM to get it onto that new configuration. So just waiting for that. It's gonna reboot, and then we can run the test script and see if the actual test works. I'm particularly wondering whether the step that installs Incus is going to work properly, because that's the biggest change, really. It's interesting. And for no kernel changes needed, usually it restarts. Yeah, it does reboot. Is it just because default prevents the reboot? Is that what's going on? Yeah, okay, that's a problem. Okay, well, anyway, in this case, I'm just going to reboot. RAM for the VM, I think they've got 8 gigs. I think 2 CPUs, probably 4 CPUs. 4 CPUs. Keep forgetting I'm not running as root. There we go. Okay, so the VM is restarting. The downside with the change I just did earlier is that it's not going to actually work, because default is going to screw with us effectively. So I'm just gonna need to mess with the kernel setting a bit. So if kernel is just default, then we want kernel to become Zabli, else we're gonna want kernel equals Zabli. Okay, that should do what we want. Okay, and now the VM should be back up. It is. It's actually run as root this time, so I don't get all kind of problems. We can see we're running the correct test kernel, so that's all good. And let's run the actual test script. I just want to recheck the install. There's more code that can go away. Hold on. Test Incus C group. That wait snapseed thing. Don't need that. So that can go away. Cleanup is fine. That's fine. Okay. So let's transfer that updated script over. For anyone wondering why I make so many typos, I don't actually see like a quarter of the screen because of the microphone. So that would be why. Okay, let's run the script. So it's installing curl. Then it should be able to download the keys. Come on. Okay. So it's got the package repo installed, and it's installing Incus. Actually, just zoom that one in. It's got extra dependencies, so I wonder if I missed them. Let me just check, because we need iperf to be installed at some point. We're installing iperf inside. Oh, we might only be running it inside, maybe? I thought it was running against the outside. Yeah, pretty sure it is. Okay, so that's install Incus, that's install test dependencies, and we need iperf3. Let me just go and try and install. Okay, well, I was just saying that it's gonna fail because of iperf3, and it did before I had time to go and correct that. So Let's see. Now the point that that VM is obviously a bit dirty right now. So I'm going to manually install Hyper3, similar to what the script would have done. Okay. And then I'm going to have to go and delete the test instance that's there. So deleting that. And then I'm going to go and mangle the test script to not try to install anything. I mean, that would work fine. That would work fine. Let's try it. Let's just try it, because it might be that all of the steps can be rerun safely on an existing system. We'll see. Yeah, seems to be the case. So anyway, it's running the tests again now. It didn't make it all the way to the network test, which is one of the last ones, so that's a good sign. So we see network limits, we're restarting the instance, waiting 10 seconds, and then starting with hyperv. There we go. And it failed because network not found. Okay, so there's a hard-coded lexdbr0 in that script, which is not gonna work. So that needs to be Incus instead. Transfer the script again, delete the instance again, and rerun this thing. Yeah. So with a bit of luck this time the network test will succeed, and if that all clears then can just push that to Jenkins and see what happens when it's run in all three configurations, because we're just testing one of them right now here, which is the default ones, not cgroup 2, not like nothing particularly special as far as config. That being said, it does run in cgroup 2 mode now. I've got to check. I wonder if we actually messed up that test when moving to Jammy. So effectively, for those who don't know, Jammy or Ubuntu 22.04 default to cgroup 2. There's another missing dependency. It might be that in the past we did not expect that in our test, and that the test is effectively wrong now. So I need to make sure. It could be that what we currently have in the kernel script, which is force the system into cgroup 2 mode, needs to also have a force the system into cgroup 1 mode, just so we can test things correctly. All right, I forgot to delete the instance. Okay. So for those who didn't notice, it failed because of another missing command, which was JQ. So I installed that command, added it to the script, and we're running through that dance again. Okay. So network test next. Hopefully it actually passes this time around. I'm quite happy with that particular network test when I wrote it, because it actually tests with actual network traffic. It doesn't just like make sure that the kernel has the kernel config in place like we do some of the other tests. This one actually measures and then accepts the test as successful if we're within like 10% of the limit effectively. So we can see it was set to probably 10 megabits symmetric, and we're doing 11 and 11, which is good. Now it's being bumped to 50 by 200. And we did, no, the first one was no limit. It was doing 11 gig by 11 gig. Now it's got a limit of 50 by 200, and it did 39 by 181. And the test passed. So we're all good with this test. Now, what I need to look at is, again, the Jenkins config for it, because that seems wrong. So the assumption here is that default is cgroup 1, with cgroup 2 being cgroup 2 and swap account being swap account on cgroup 1. This is not the case anymore because of the kernel that's being run here. So that test was actually wrong for quite some time by the looks of it. We do need effectively the cgroup 1 call, and then swap account should be cgroup 1 swap account. So let's see. The cgroup 2 is effectively the default these days. That's effectively the change there. So I think we should actually be able to do this instead, making default be cgroup 2, cgroup 1, and then cgroup 1 with swap accounting. That should be fine, because cgroup 2, I believe, has swap accounting by default. So that should be okay. Let's go with that. So there are a number of changes to this test. I need to go fix that. Test Incus cgroup. Fix ports to Incus. So that's fine. And then we add. I don't remember, did I actually retitle it? I did not. Incus test cgroup. There we go. Cgroup test. Okay, so that's going to be appearing in Jenkins shortly, which is good. And I need to make sure again that the various test runners all have the repo updated. But in this case, I also need to directly go on the Jenkins server to make sure it also has an updated version of the repo. Otherwise, I need to wait at least half an hour before this test would be available. So Jenkins on. So I'm going on that server and just pulling this. Oops, it's a proxy. There we go. Cool. So that's just a matter of time until Jenkins has it. We don't need that VM anymore, so I can go ahead and release it. There. Okay. So we take the overview, should be back to just one machine being deployed. Yep, all good. And we're just waiting for this one to update, which will add another test down here. I don't remember quite how often this particular script runs now. If I check, I might be able to figure it out quickly. So looks like it's every 5 minutes, which would mean next update in about 2 minutes. So I guess we can wait for that one. And yeah, that should be it for those two tests. There are a bunch more, as you can see, that will need porting. Some are easier than others, so I'll probably start with some of the, well, I don't know. I might start with some of the easier ones. I might start with some of the more useful ones. As far as more useful ones, the GPU tests come to mind because those are pretty complex, but also the kind of thing that is a bit of a, like, it's easy for us to break it in a release, and then we just won't know until someone hits that in production, which is really frustrating. So that's why we've got physical machines with actual GPUs that can run those kind of tests. So I might try and restore those. They also manage, those machines also managed by MAS. So if we go here, we can see some of the machines are not VM something. We've got 3 Raspberry Pis, but we also have this machine here called Argos. And that's the one that's got the, it's got Mellanox dual 100 gig cards, and it's got an NVIDIA A100, which is what we use for all of the GPU testing. So it's got all that stuff, and it's an AMD Ryzen system. And then for some of the more complex networking or storage stuff, we've got that other box here, which has a fair amount of CPU. It's like 24 cores, 128 gigs of RAM. It's got pretty much all sizes of network cards we can think of. It goes from basic gigabit Ethernet to 2.5, 5 gig, 10 gig, 40 gig. Not sure where the 40 gig is actually. I don't see it right now. And then 100 gigs. There's a question around the Pi 5. Probably not. There's no good reason for us to test on Pi 5. So we've got a number of the Pi 4s with I think they're the 8 gigs of RAM config, so they're the very beefy ones. And for things to work in MAS, they need to be able to do normal network boot. So actually run Raspberry Pis with a custom firmware, which gets us EFI on Raspberry Pi 4s. That works fine, but they're also extremely slow ARM boards. Like when I want to do actual testing, I use a VM like I had open earlier, Build 08 was the one I had open, which runs not on consumer grade Raspberry Pi, but runs on an actual ARM64 server. So that machine is like it's a 45 cores machine with 100 gigs of RAM, 40 gigabit networking, and NVMe SSDs, like an actual very powerful machine. So when we test on ARM, that's what we tend to use, knowing full well that like if that works, like ARM64 is ARM64. If it works well on those servers, it will work fine on a Raspberry Pi running the same kernel. The Raspberry Pi in this lab here are mostly convenient because with the big server, we can't, we run VMs on the server, and ARM does not support nested VMs. So if we need to do VM testing, we can't do it that way. So that's why we use the Raspberry Pis, because even though they're tiny resource-wise, they're capable of running virtual machines. So we can use them for that kind of test. Okay, so let's see, it should be time. So we should have the test in here, we do. Okay, so now I'm just gonna kick it off. And if all goes well, we should see a change in mass. That 3 of those VMs will start provisioning. There we go, allocated 02, allocated 05, allocated 08. Okay, and they should start deploying. Once they start deploying, they show up down there. 02. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so all 3 of them are supposed to be deploying. I'm just going to make sure they actually start, given the problems we had earlier. We've got 3 running. Okay, so that's good. And if we do the console on 02, we should see it do the whole dance of starting, booting up from Mars. Here we go. And Mars is reasonably detailed as far as showing you what's going on. It's a bit of a pain to update sometimes. But if you go here and click on unlock VM08, we should see it's deploying. Exact log shows that it's last thing it did was pull the file system. But we're actually looking at VM02, I believe. So let's go look at that one. So if I pull VM02 logs, okay, we can see that it actually is running Cloud Init, doing things like user creation, a bunch of other stuff. So it's effectively getting the install environment and everything up and running. It's funny because we can see it like keep trying to start the XD agent in the background. Yeah, not gonna work so well right now. So it's all the comments it's running for the actual provisioning. It uses a tool called Curtain to do like download an image and blast it to disk pretty much. It's not as efficient as it would be just creating new Incus VMs instead of using Mars, but the benefit again is that we get to use the exact same tool whether we're dealing with physical systems or virtual systems. So that makes it a bit easier. You can literally change one keyword in a Jenkins config and have it select like a physical machine for one. And those VMs are obviously hosted on top of the same cluster we use for all of our CI. So it's still easy to manage. And okay, so it did finish blasting the image. Now it's just running through bootloader config and that kind of stuff. So it's almost done. It is pretty quick. Those VMs are obviously backed by NVMe. So it's pretty fast IO. We don't want our test to spend, half an hour just deploying a system. That's a bit ridiculous. So we're trying to get them as fast as possible. I guess if we update the Mars output, we should also see, yeah, so just configuring OS. So the actual install is done. There was configuring storage, then 10 seconds later installing OS, then less than like 40 seconds later the OS install was done and it's doing configuration, and then it's gonna reboot. And after that, our scripts take over installing the kernel we want, rebooting again, and then running the actual test. Let's see, did you update anything? Yeah, it shows installing kernel right now. Does it show me when the whole thing started? Can I do 200 messages? There we go. Okay, so the machine was first started 1907, so that was about 4 minutes ago. I guess if it takes about 5 minutes to install, that's reasonable. And like with the other test that currently runs on physical systems, so if we go check here, is this guy here, the CAS equal benchmark. And the reason why we want physical system for that one is because, well, it's a benchmark. So we want to see day to day if there's any difference in performance. And you just can't do that if you're testing in cloud instances or if you're testing even in VMs because of the noisy neighbor problem. Like you effectively have other things on the system that can impact your performance. So that's why we want to run on the exact same hardware every day with nothing else running on it to really have the metrics we're getting be about the software we're testing and not about whatever else is going on in the environment. All right, let's see if it's done. VMO 2, yeah, so it did, it's rebooting now. So just about 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes into its deployment, it's rebooting. And it's gonna get into the install environment, which then Jenkins will take over and actually deploy what we need. Yeah, there we go. So if we go look at Jenkins now, open the job. So test C group job here. I'm not sure which is which, so let's just assume this one maybe. Oh, this one is VMO 8. Maybe C group 1. C group 1 is VMO 5. Wow. So this one is VMO 2. C group 1 swap a come on. You can open this thing. Okay, well, there's a bit of a glitch there. I think it doesn't take the comma in the name. That's probably the issue. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to fix that because that's gonna be a problem. Anyways, well, let's go fix that while the rest is going on. So we were doing C group 1 swap account, so we're just gonna change that to just swap account and make it so if the kernel is set to swap account, then we actually want Zabli C group 1 and the kernel. So that should fix that. Okay, so that will be fixed for the next time around. And here we can see what's going on with the, so this is the C group 1 test. It's just finishing installing the kernel. Once that's done, it should restart. So the test will expect it to reboot. Okay, so it's configuring it for C group 1 here and rebooting. So we see we lost the connection. And now the test is just gonna retry every few seconds until it comes back online, and then it will run the actual test. I'm not sure if the C group 2 one is ahead, maybe. What's it doing? No, it's at the same stage. Okay, so let's go back to C group 1. Okay, so again, just a few more seconds here, and then the test will run. There we go, running, and it did not get the test because the name is wrong. Whoops. Okay. Wow, that's unfortunate. I should have seen it. There's a remaining Lexd in here. So it needs to be Incus Europe. There we go. Single. Okay, well, I'll probably spare you the details at that point because we're gonna have to wait another 5 minutes before Jenkins updates, and then rerun the whole test. It's gonna take another 15-20 minutes. But that's kind of the idea for how that stuff works. So there was a question around just Jenkins and multinode. Yeah, so the question was whether there's agents running on the others. Yeah, there effectively is. So Jenkins can be configured. I'm just gonna cancel this thing here. It can be configured with SSH to the other nodes. So we've got all of those servers here, and you can effectively enter in Jenkins, like how many executors you want, the paths, tags, and stuff, the SSH address and credentials you need to connect to that machine. And then Jenkins will connect, transfer its agent binary or Java file effectively over there, and then start it. And that connects back to Jenkins, and then you can run jobs on it. So we've always done that. We don't usually run any jobs on the main Jenkins server itself, because that's a bit risky. The only thing we actually run on the main Jenkins servers are those kind of jobs that just talk to the API of Maz or something else to run a test. And yeah, it cannot deploy itself in the sense of like it needs SSH and it needs Java to be installed, I believe. But after that, it transfers its own Java binary over. I think the main reason for that is that you don't want, with Jenkins having security updates and a bit of a mess every week, you don't really want to have to maintain that on all of the test runners either. So whenever Jenkins connects, it just transfers what it needs. So that works well enough. I mean, all of those test runners are fully automated on our side. They are deployed by Ansible. We can wipe them and redeploy them anytime. So that works pretty well for us. And that lets us test on various architectures. Like as mentioned, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are ARM64. The rest is Intel. And then we've got the SHF ones, all the ones that run here in my rack at home. And we've got 3 in the data center to also have extra capacity in case something happens with whether it's my power or internet or whatever at home, then those can still run a limited number of jobs. Like it works well enough for what we do. It's not exactly in love with Jenkins, never have been. I'm really not a big fan of massive Java applications. And I mean, Jenkins has a security history to prove why massive Java applications are a bit of a problem. But as a fancy scheduler, the way we use it works well enough. And I'm looking forward to really using it just as a scheduler and remove the remaining externally triggered jobs that we have. And yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, I was hoping to be able to actually show you the job fully running. But yeah, it's gonna take another 15-20 minutes for things to line up before it can run. So hopefully you'll see that test actually be up and running soon. I'm gonna go through a list of other tests and move those as well to just get more confidence in the general state of Incus. And yeah, that's it. As mentioned, expecting to do an Incus 0.2 next week. So I might do a live stream just the day before, something like that, to go through the last finishing touches. But we've got the process to handle backporting fixes from next day. We've got the release process in place. We've got all of the right accounts and everything to publish to like the Chocolatey store, to publish to Homebrew, to publish to everything now. So it should be a much smoother process than with 0.1. We should have 0.2 released in like just a few hours, pretty much. So yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks a lot for watching along. Again, if you want to give Incus a try, the easiest is to go on our online demo. You can just go there and give it a shot immediately. If you want to install it, then there are those packages that I'm making that you can use on Debian or Ubuntu. There are also now packages being made for a number of other distros. Gentoo has some. We've seen there's a Fedora Copper repository also available. There's a AUR for Arch Linux. There's like a bunch of different packages that are starting to get in place. There's ongoing packaging work on Debian as well. So it's it's very good to see things kind of lining up, and I expect that with the next few releases of Incus, that will become more and more widely available to everyone. If you want to help me out with the work on Incus, you'll find down below links to either my GitHub sponsor page or to Patreon. So either way, that's also very appreciated to just help fund some of that effort. Thanks a lot for watching. If you've got any questions, you can leave them down below in the comment section, or you can go on our community forum where I and a number of our community members will be happy to help you out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.